There we go. We should be up and running. I am here today on the Dysfunction with my very good friend Ron, who goes by ADHD Coach Ron on TikTok, and I'm going to let him introduce all his platforms. But first, I want to do a little bit of housekeeping. I want to remind you all that on this specific Twitch show where I'm doing these one-on-one interviews, I'm not going to be taking engagement from viewers. That's because I really want to highlight how awesome it is when two neurodivergent people sit down and just start talking about the way they think. I think it provides a lot of insight. I think it can help a lot of people connect with their own neurodivergency that they didn't know that they had. And that's my goal in this. A few other housekeeping notes. I have a sponsor, which is myself. So if you're looking for a real estate agent in the Denver metro area, you can email dopaminedysfunctional@gmail.com, or you can hit any of these links. Reach out to me if you got friends, family looking for houses. I'm your guy. So with that, let's go to ADHD Coach Ron. Ron, why don't you introduce yourself and tell people where we can find you online?
Yeah, what's up, everyone? I'm Ron. I'm ADHD Coach Ron on TikTok. On Instagram, I'm ADHD_Ron. And then same for Twitter, ADHD_Ron. And sometimes I write stuff on there. I'm still trying to figure out Twitter. I don't know if you have Twitter figured out yet. But...
No, not at all. I mean,
no.
Just
sometimes I
thoughts.
just post shit and I'm like, oh, cool.
Yep.
So, and then, yeah, you can also check me out on my website, ADHDCoachRon.com. And contact me on there or just say hello. I always encourage people to just message me on Instagram. Like, you know, I'm all about building friendships and communities. So let me know what you think of stuff. Whether it's ADHD related or not, let's chat, man. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. So,
otherwise,
yeah, let's get into it. So right off the bat, I like to ask people about any comorbidities and stuff they've been diagnosed with or self-diagnosed with.
Okay. Not diagnosed with anything other than ADHD. I mean, I haven't been diagnosed with anxiety or depression, but I feel like the last 3-4 years, that's really taken hold of my life. I know what got me into kind of reacquainting myself with my ADHD self, if you will, was the fact I was having like panic attacks and anxiety attacks. And it was like pre-pandemic I was doing that, like waking up in the middle of the night thinking I was dying, you know, shit like
sure,
that.
Yeah. Yeah, like, absolutely. I know all about it. You don't have to tell me.
Heart attack.
Right.
I woke up one time and told Gwen, I was like, I think I'm having a heart attack. And she's like, okay. It was like the middle of the night. She's like, I don't mean to like discount what you're going through, but you do not seem like you're having a heart attack. Right. And I was just like, which arm is it that's supposed to be? I don't feel good. I don't get it. And so and then one time we called like the hotline for like if you're having a heart attack and like called a nurse and she started talking to me, and the second I started talking about it, I was like, yeah, I'm okay.
I'm feeling good now. Like I just needed to get it out. Like I needed somebody else to hear it, and now I'm feeling
I was like,
right.
I'm okay. All right, yeah. So that would be my comorbidity is some panics and anxiety.
Yeah, I'm definitely have the same. So I diagnosed ADHD, depression, and anxiety. And he said like maybe dyslexia. I was like, okay, but like we didn't really do any testing. Like I don't know where you're pulling this from. Like maybe it's just the way I filled out my paperwork. But like
he's just picking shit out of it.
Oh, exactly.
Like, dyslexia, dyspraxia, all
like,
of it, right?
My handwriting's terrible, so possibly, right? So I want to talk a little bit about your journey from like finding out you had ADHD. I don't know when you found out, if it was in childhood or older, but I want to know the journey from getting that diagnosis to becoming an actual ADHD coach, because I think that's incredibly fascinating.
Yeah. So I was diagnosed at 12. And when I was diagnosed, even though they were already like calling it ADHD in the medical community, I was diagnosed with ADD. I still think there was that weird stigma around what that was.
Sure.
Though I look back now and I'm like, I definitely had the H. So I don't know where they got that from.
Yeah.
But I was like, all right, sure. And so was really interesting. I did, so I tried so many different medications, and I did brain training stuff where I went in once a week and they hooked up a bunch of shit to my head.
Oh, wow.
And I got to play this like game on a computer where I had to keep a plane up. And because what they thought was that like it's that our neurons are firing correctly. So the way it was explained to me was just that like the connection between my neurons was weak. And so to make it stronger, you had to train it. And so I would have to go and they would be able to tell when it was firing, and it was just practicing keeping something like up, so keeping it firing constantly as it got boring.
Okay.
And they found now that that works temporarily and it has zero long-term effects. So it was like they're doing it and they're like, wow, look, he's getting better. But the second you stop, it's like,
oh yeah,
back to nothing. So
you're like part of an experimental group,
right?
Yeah, exactly. Okay, all right. You got some behind the scenes testing done. Yeah. All right.
I actually had so much information and tests and like paperwork that I had kept for a really long time, and it was really interesting. But I had a really weird relationship with ADHD. My parents didn't understand it. It was like, here's some meds. Why isn't he doing better in school now? Like,
right.
You know, I wasn't gifted and talented, and I had like a high IQ, whatever the fuck that means. And it was like, you should be getting straight A's to be a doctor or whatever the hell. Why aren't you doing that? And when the meds weren't really working either, a lot of shame was attached to it with things like, you didn't do your homework, you must not be taking your meds, like things like that. And so there was it was a really interesting relationship with that. So much so that after I graduated and left home, I stopped taking meds. I hated the way at the time that it made me feel. I hated telling people I had ADHD. In fact, they had even told me when I was diagnosed not to tell the school, to tell anybody.
Oh, really?
ADHD. Yeah. They were just like.
So when was this about? Like in the 90s? 2000s?
Yeah, it was. I think I was diagnosed in 96, and 96 or 97, and so like all this stuff was like 99, 2000 is kind of what we're talking about here.
Okay.
And then when I graduated, I just decided to stop taking meds and just kind of, get through ADHD life, which can work sometimes.
Right. I was going to ask, like, how'd that go?
It was a lot of like, well, for instance, it took me 12 years to graduate college just because off and on.
I understand that. I was 9 years or something like that.
Yeah. It was just, it kept like not showing up and like trying to get through, and really what it was like, for the first time, you study and show up and do shit in order to pass. And it was like my whole life I was able to get through high school by just like, I think I had a 3.0 graduating high school by like barely get rock star. Yeah. but like schmoozing teachers, and like I was, they were just like, right. Oh, Ron, he's such a in class, but man, he never turns in his homework.
Right.
So anyway, yeah, I kept when Gwen and I moved out here to California, I kept getting different jobs here and there. I worked as a property manager somewhere. I got bored, went to a different property, switched companies, went to a different property, ended up quitting that. Gwen and I started a murder mystery company.
What? Hold on. Yeah. Hold on. I did not know this. You're gonna have to elaborate.
I had this moment once where I had a friend. It was my Australian friend Talina, who was a roommate at the time, and she was just like, "Yo, what do you want to do with your life?" And I was like, "I don't know." And she's like, "Well, you like people, and I like mysteries. Like, if anything, the only books that I had finished up until a couple of years ago were like mystery novels. Like,
okay.
So I always really liked mysteries, and." So I was like, okay, like we actually did like a party company where we were going to create murder mystery parties for people. So we wrote a couple mysteries. We ended up having a couple live events at a few restaurants in town. We did a couple corporate events.
Very cool.
Yeah, the biggest problem with that was that we were good at it. We were having so much fun with it, but like terrible at budgeting and figuring out like how to, because we wanted to pay everyone way more than we should have for like a
Sure.
startup company. And so we were just like, here. And it was a lot of fun, but lost all the money that we had saved. So we had to go back to the drawing board with that. I started driving for Postmates. Gwen started doing extra work for things, so she started babysitting and just doing. I mean, really, it was any opportunity we had. Like we were video game testers for a while. We just did anything we could to like save money.
Awesome.
And then I got my real estate license while I was doing that. And as
Something
you know, in
we
real
have
estate,
in common, right? Yeah.
Exactly. As you know, in real estate, you have to like really devote a lot of time and like energy into marketing yourself in order for it to work.
Yep.
Unfortunately, for the first couple of years, did not have that. So it was a lot of kind of bouncing around to things. Had this license, and then finally got a couple sales, got some other things going, and then the pandemic hit, and things actually took off. So that entire year, I did really well.
Yep.
And everything was really fantastic, except I wasn't happy. I just started going to therapy that year. So this was in 2020, and talking to my therapist about like what it was I wanted to do with my life. And whenever anybody had asked me that, I had always said, I want to live my life after, like I don't know what I want to do 9 to 5, and I don't care.
Right.
I just want to make enough money so that I can have barbecues with my friends and like people come over, and we just like, I care so much about like, being the hub of like friend groups and like just having people together and just having a good time.
That's awesome.
Gwen and I had a place where we had like 4 roommates, and we were always just having like parties over, and we had this like backyard where we just barbecue and do all this other fun shit. So that was kind of what I wanted in life. And then I started to realize that that wasn't enough. Not that friends and stuff aren't enough, but that like I didn't have like a purpose, and I never really had one. So I started thinking a lot about that. Started talking to my therapist about why really I felt like I needed, and it kept coming back to ADHD and like how I felt like I was less than, like I had untapped potential.
Yeah.
Like I, needed to be bigger than I was. I was like, I felt like I wasn't achieving anything. And so I got on TikTok because of Gwen, because Gwen was posting TikToks like crazy.
For those of you who don't know, Gwen, it's Gwen Carroll at TikTok, right?
Yeah, at Gwen Carroll, and then on Instagram, she's at Gwendol Instagram.
Right, so she does fantastic like dance montages and like just an amazing creator in her own right.
Sure.
So like a power couple on TikTok right here. We're talking.
I mean, she really carries the power couple. But yes, she's phenomenal. And so I was really just a viewer of TikToks for the longest time, and started to see some creators on there that kind of spoke to me in a way that I had never been spoke to about ADHD before.
Right.
ADHD, especially when I was diagnosed with it too, and you still hear a lot of stigmas where it's like, well, everyone's got ADHD. I think there was this Netflix show. I don't know if you've seen it. It's called Take Your Meds. Okay.
What's it about?
It'll piss you off.
Oh, it's a bad Netflix show. Okay.
Like I watched it, and it was like there were some things that were good about it where I was like, yeah, totally. But they really dove into the fact that like that ADHD meds were just a product of capitalism trying to, and it's like
same sad story, right?
And I was just like, it was pissing me off, and I was so activated by it. Like I was pissed. There were some things I was excited about, and really one of the things was they followed a couple ADHDers, and it was this one kid whose parents wanted him because of all how smart he was and wanted him to do these things, and he just wanted to be an artist, and he was basically like fuck everyone, like, and he just went and did his thing, and he looked so happy. And I remembered like seeing that and just being like, I don't know what I want to do. But after seeing all these TikTokers post stuff, I started to post some things. And at first it was like, I want to post some stuff that I think will help people.
Right.
And some of my first TikTok videos are as fuck. Like, and I look back on it, and it
All
was
right,
like,
so walk me through the first one. What your first video? Like, you're like, oh, I've got to talk about this, right? This is the one that pushes you over the line. So what? Tell me about it.
I'm gonna look at it because it's embarrassing as fuck real quick. But it's like, it was definitely like, it was me dancing and being weird and like pointing at stuff and like words coming out of the screen. You know.
Quality TikTok content.
For sure. In fact, at one point, I was so embarrassed about it, I deleted it. Not deleted it, but I made it like private, and then I put it back because I've actually thought about it a lot as like, that's like a starting point for me. Like, whenever somebody's like, I want to post on TikTok, but I'm afraid, and I'm like, here, let me show you this shit, and like you get to see like some of my earlier stuff, and it's like, what's funny is like what I post now and the things that I'm able to like teach people would have never happened without this shit.
Right.
And so that's something to help you. But like, it was just me and going like, over the past year, I started leaning into my ADHD instead of hating that part of me. So it was like, I'm sensitive, I have ADHD, I'm, there's RSD involved in it, and I'm feeling great regardless. Fuck you, people. And it was kind of like that. Like, it was my coming out party.
Right. ADHD. Awesome.
Yeah. So I started doing that and learning about things. I asked a lot of questions to some creators and got some really great answers about stuff. And then I found coaching through that and got really kind of hyper focused on being like, I want to do that. I want to freaking help people.
Yeah, like, I wouldn't know what that's like at all, right? Like that,
right? You're like, fuck, man, I got to do this.
Right.
And I'll never forget the day I did it because I was nervous to say to Gwen, but like I needed Gwen's support, And so I had this fear that I was going to be like, hey, I want to be an ADHD coach, and her kind of be like, another thing you're going to do, which she's never done that. It's just been the thing in my head that I figured she was going to say.
Right, because your mind thinks like, this is what they should say back to me, right? That's your anticipation.
I'm told my whole life, like, I'm someone who's like, oh, Ron's like, I have 7 email addresses and like 7 different Instagram accounts for all the different shit that I've created over the past like 10 years.
Right.
And so I'm going like, fuck, I really want to do this. And it, like, I remember us walking home from our friend's house. It was in, I think, November of 2020. And just almost immediately, she's like, absolutely. She's like, that is 100% what you should be doing. And I was just like,
wow,
really? And she's like, yeah. She's like, I know for a fact that's what you should be doing. Like, I've seen me change as I've started doing this. And really what it started, and I'm sure you've gotten these messages and understand this, but when people reach out or they send you a message and it's someone that you don't know, never met before, and they say something like, thank you for your content, or you make me feel heard, or I feel validated. And there was times that like I would tear up out of these just long messages from people explaining what they're going through. And it was just like, holy fuck, I'm making a difference.
Right.
Even if it's just this one person,
sure.
you know? And I was like, I have to do this. And so a lot of research went into it. I was very lucky enough, like I said, to have had a great year in real estate. So I had the ability to dive headfirst into this. I still did real estate most of last year, but okay. I'm officially done with that.
Nice.
I've just focused on this, and really it's become like the more time I have to create things and the more time I have to learn and to teach, then the better I can be at this. And this is what I freaking want. So
That's awesome. Like,
yeah.
congratulations. Like, that's a
Thanks,
huge
man.
leap. Like, I was in a very similar situation in college, right? I had already spent like 5.5 years, no, 6 years working towards a teaching degree, right?
Oh shit. Yeah.
And I was in my semester, my senior year, second semester. I was about to start student teaching, and I had to go to my wife and say, "Hey, this is not something I want to do." And she's like, "Well, what do you want to do?" I'm like, "Well, I think I want to go into finance, actually." And she's like, I mean, okay. And so that put me back, a couple years before I got my degree. And then I worked in banking for a few years. And then I had to have that same conversation again. Like, hey, I really want to leave banking, even though I just got my degree in it and I'm making pretty good money here. And I want to go into real estate because that's what I want to do. And then, like a year ago, I had a similar conversation with her again. Like, hey, I want to go to the doctor and see if I have ADHD because I think I actually need to do that. It's not a want thing. But, it's like I feel like I'm always throwing curveballs at her. And like she's super accepting, but I get that feeling all the time of like, oh, she's immediately going to shoot this down. She's going to reject it. And my wife is like the sweetest person ever. Totally supportive. She's always believed in me. Like even when I was like 19, totally in debt, like no future outlook, wasn't going to college, anything. But still in the back of my mind, I expected her to like ridicule me or mock me or be like, absolutely not. And it's so interesting that you mentioned that because we build up these things in our mind. And that's one thing I really wanted to touch on you with was rumination, because we first connected over your rumination video when you were drawing on the mirror. And I was probably one of those people sending you a thank you message from my old account before I even started Dopamine Dysfunctional. I was following you way before.
Nice.
So
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So it was that rumination video, like mirror talks, anything with dry erase boards. I'm like, yeah, let's do this. Like this is fun. So tell me about like your experience with rumination and the kind of role that it plays in your life.
Fuck. In my life, rumination was big. I think the rumination was part of the reason I started having like anxiety and panic attacks because our brains are like the neurodivergent brain is just so intense, right? And I think what I learned through through ADCA, which was ADD Coaches Academy, which is to like add to K, but it's not. It's just still ADCA. And they address that. They're like, listen, we did this a long time ago, and this is what it is. But like, we had like this. I'll like never forget. We had personal transformation was one of the classes I took, and it was kind of like being coached from the like instructors, so we knew what it was like to go through coaching and what it could do.
Okay.
And the rumination part of it was so important to me because I was like, yeah, I remember having a moment where, and again, weird to admit this, but like I remember having a moment where I thought there's no way all these people in my life like me. Like,
wow.
Just like believing that like there's got to be something that I'm missing.
Right.
And starting to think like, well, maybe this person's doing it for a different reason. And then I came up with this and talk about like, because what happens is this shit happens in our head.
Yep.
And the thing similar to how I thought I was having a heart attack until I said it out loud, and then I was like, "This is fucking nuts."
Right.
I'm not having a heart attack.
Sure.
Like,
yeah, absolutely.
In my head, holy shit, I'm having a heart attack. And so I started to like come up with these stories in my head, and I've talked about this before, where it's like we're so creative and we're conceptual thinkers, so like we need all the pieces. And one of the most common human experiences that everyone faces is we don't have all the pieces. No one has all the pieces, right? But we need to have them all.
Yeah.
So we fill them in with shit. And so we start going like, well, I can't just accept the fact that these people like me. Like, why do they like me? Right.
Right.
And if I can't come up with the reason that could be just because they enjoy hanging out with me, it could be like maybe it's because like I don't know, they like hanging out with Gwen, so they're hanging out with me, right?
Right.
Or maybe it's because and then I came to a place and my parents are not rich. They're not poor, but they're not rich. I actually had this theory that my parents were paying people off to hang out with me. Like that literally is where I went. And I was like,
Right.
it's they probably have more money than I know and it's secret. And it's like this fam fucking went there. Like and had this whole thing. So much so that like I'd be hanging out with people and be quiet and be like looking at signs that were not there.
Right.
And creating these stories in my head and saying it out loud now, I'm like ridiculous,
No,
I
not at all.
really,
I totally understand what
I
you're
really
saying.
felt
Yeah.
it, you know. And so, the interesting thing that you learn about rumination is that because I always thought of myself as a very intuitive person, and I didn't realize that my thoughts were not my intuition, and that was like the first
Yeah.
step to realize.
That's massive. And
Um,
like the way you talk about it, I totally connect with. I want to say, like, while I'm ruminating, our brains are very creative, right? And we like to go off on little tangents. But when we
uh,
do in a rumination stage, like we pull those tangents into like the reality of it, right?
yeah,
And so like
totally.
it totally makes sense if somebody like is upset with you. People get upset with you all the time, right? Like
Right.
it's
Yeah.
totally natural. But in your
Hmm.
situation, that somebody just being upset with you would reinforce and validate all the other emotions and thoughts and feelings that you were
Yep.
already having, even though they're well within their right just to be upset for whatever reason, right? Like no
Yeah.
big deal.
Yeah.
But
Right.
by pulling that in, you validate that, and then it becomes like a truth, and it's an easy way to affirm a negative when you're in that rumination stage.
That's where like conspiracy theorists get a lot of their stuff from. You can
Right.
always find something, right? And especially when you're looking for it. It's like that idea of like why you can't just you have to prove someone guilty, like they're innocent and so proven guilty because if you find something and you're like, "Oh, this puts them there or this could be," like then you start thinking that, you know? And if you're looking for it, you can find it. And a lot of things they teach you in coaching is the thing you focus on gets bigger.
Yes.
And so, and I think I've talked about this before, but like our brains don't know the difference between negative and positive. It just our brains want to be activated.
Yeah, I was just about
So
to
like,
ask you, like, what's the difference in your mind between like an internal hyperfocus when you're
yeah,
focusing on something productive or positive and
yeah,
rumination? Because for me, it feels almost identical, only the negative and positive aspects. Like one's more beneficial for my life, so we say it's
right,
okay, but it can be also detrimental with the amount
sure.
of energy and thought I put towards something.
So like the things that activate an ADHD brain are interest, novelty, and urgency. And urgency can come in the form of fear too. It's like this survival thing, and that's if you've heard, like I'll do it when like a gun is to my head, I'll fucking do anything. Like I'll take care of everything I need to, and like
Right.
that's part of the urgency. There's also the belief, and someone told me this once a long time ago, which has helped me in public speaking situations, which now I like love talking to everyone.
Really? See,
But
I still struggle in that,
so
and I'm talking to 50,000 people on TikTok every day, but you put me in a room full of 10 people, we're going to have problems.
usually it's when I first get into like a party and I don't know people, it's like I have to feel myself out. I'm super
Okay,
quiet
so
at first.
so you have a warm up period. I always told
Yes.
people like I
Yeah.
have a warm up period, like I have to get to know
Totally.
you a little bit first, and then after
Feel the
that,
vibe. Yeah, I have to
yeah.
decide which mask I'm gonna put on.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and like, well, it's so much. There's so much context when you walk into a room full of people you
Yeah,
don't know that you actually have to like measure it and like make sure
totally.
like you're doing the right things to appease everybody or like blend in or
100%.
whatever. Yeah.
But the thing that I had heard is that our brains have like that excitement and fear are like the same react. I don't know if the same neurons or the same reaction to it.
Okay.
So it's like if you're able, they did a study once where I think it was a public speaking thing, but they told one group before they went on every time to just tell themselves out loud that they're excited to do this. And that was like the only thing they did. And they did it like every for like 2 weeks or something. And by the second week, the group that said, I'm excited, like out loud beforehand, whether they believed it or not, by the end, were so much less nervous to give speeches and stuff because they just trained. Like you can train your brain to do shit.
Sure.
And like, so it's that I like, and it's sometimes it takes longer than others for sure. And there are definitely situations where I'm nervous and that shit doesn't work. But I've learned that like when I'm nervous about something to try to be excited about it. So with that being said, we like to be scared. Whether we admit it or not.
Oh, okay, all right. I'm gonna let you elaborate.
So what I'm gonna say is, let me go back. We don't like to be scared. Is like to be scared. So our brains, like, will take that, and even if we're like, I don't want to watch the scary, because I hate scary movies, but I will think about those scary movies for days, and I'll think about that shit constantly, and my brain's just on. And so even though I'm not enjoying it, my brain won't shut off. Like. My brain's like, no, we need to figure this out and we need to put it into context in our world today and how this shit might happen and what this will do. And it's like my brain is now on this like path of figuring shit out. So when it comes to rumination, like that's what happens. We have this fear, we get activated, and our brain's like, great, we got the activation we want. And keep it going. And so it turns into this, I need to now be a problem solver about this and I need to understand it fully.
Right.
And we don't ever have all the information, right? But like someone told me, they're like, if you find yourself saying, well, that must mean this, or that makes me think this might be the case, that you're ruminating, that you are now in this place of like, you are not taking facts. You're going, well, now when I think about it, if that's the case, then that must mean back when, nice to me, that won't make sense for this like new theory that I have. So it's got to be something. That must mean that he doesn't like me.
Trying to qualify things.
Yeah,
totally.
Yeah. So, I mean, and yeah, our brains are creative freaking storytellers and, adrenaline junkies in the sense that like, we might not enjoy being scared, but again, our brain doesn't give a shit if we like it or not. Our brain's like, yeah, I'm into this. I'm activated.
Right. That I love the idea. I've never heard that before, where excitement and being scared are pretty much the same thing, but it makes sense, right? It's very similar feelings. Like, and I'm the type of person where I can't really tell if I'm anxious or if I'm excited. And so that's kind of what I'm relating it to. You touched on another thing I want to talk about, and I feel like we're flying through it because you're giving a lot of good information here. But you mentioned
ADHDers, man.
Right? You mentioned context, right? And you had to put something in a context that you can understand. I often find myself doing that, like teaching my brain about something instead of like just my brain learning something. Because I have to put it in a context that I understand. And when I talk about my ADHD, I talk a lot about imbalances or like extremes of a spectrum, right? Like my symptoms appear on I just picture like a scale and like two sides of justice, right? But so many times I'm out of balance. And that's the context I use to like understand my symptoms. How important is context and kind of teaching your brain how to view things for you in order to understand them?
Well, for me, I mentioned conceptual thinking before, but I'm a huge conceptual thinker, and I think most ADHDers are.
Same. Yeah, you go ahead and give it like a rundown of conceptual thinking because we've talked about this before.
Yeah. I mean, it's really like a learning modality, right? So, first off, learning and teaching styles are have been proven to be bullshit. But the interesting thing with
For
ADHD
example, I
is
was told I was an auditory learner, and only later to find out I had an auditory processing disorder.
perfect. Oh, that makes a ton of sense.
Right.
Yeah. And I don't think they're like, I get they might be bullshit in one way. They call them like preferences. And if I know anything, it's that an ADHDer will do the thing it prefers. So like if I have a preference to certain learning, that means my brain prefers this. And my brain's a stubborn motherfucker. So my brain's gonna do what it prefers. So
Sure.
like yeah, I think it's important to understand. But conceptual learning is this idea that we like the way it was explained to me first was like if you were someone who made like a part for a car but you didn't understand how the whole car worked, you would not be able to make the part. That you would just get so frustrated with the fact that you don't know why you're doing this, you don't know the purpose behind it, you don't know what it's going into. If they were just like, here's what you do, here's like, it's like if somebody tells me what to do but I don't know why I'm doing it, I'm useless. I'm like, if you're like, hey, I just need you to hit this button every like minute, I'd be like, my mind would fucking lose it. It'd be like, no, I need to know what the fuck the point is.
I say the same thing. I actually worked in a bank and they laid off a bunch of people. And I was talking to a lady and she's like, I don't know anything about banking. And I'm like, you've been in the industry for 25 years. And she's like, all I do is check signatures on checks. And I just click the same button all day long. I was like, how could you click the same button all day long without like knowing where it goes after this or the next process,
Right.
not even bothering to understand like the role that you're playing within the organization? She's like, never even thought about it. Never even bothered me. I just like sitting here and pushing this button. And it was one of the weirdest experiences I've ever had talking to somebody, but it's exactly what you're saying. Yeah.
I mean, that's a lot of times when we're kids and someone tells us we have to do something and they say because, or that you're just supposed to, and we fucking struggle with that.
Yes.
Because we're like, and sure, like it really what it is. And like a lot of times in coaching, when someone says to me, like, well, what do you want to accomplish? And they're like, I should be doing this. And I'm like, well, time out. First off, shoulds are stupid. But like, okay.
Right.
The big thing is to go, why do you want to do that? Like, well, because I'm supposed to, or because this person wants me to. I was like, no. Why do you want to? Because if we don't connect like our innate reason for doing something, it is almost impossible to get us to do something.
Right.
Otherwise, we are treating ourselves like when we force ourselves to do things, that's when we like drudge through shit and we're just like miserable about it. And then every time we do that, it's just going to get worse and worse and worse, and it's going to be harder and harder. So like, sure, right? Like the question too, like, well, why do you want to do the dishes? Like, obviously that's not going to be good. But like when you start to think about, well, when I do the dishes, like my wife's happy that I did the dishes. That's great, right? Like, or when I do the dishes, I don't have to like use like a coffee mug when I'm like trying to get a glass of water. Like I can have that. Or when like friends come over to look nice and like, well, why is that important to you? Well, because like I like when my friends are like comfortable in my house and I'm worried that they might not be comfortable.
Sure.
Like, well, that's important to me. So now I'm like, oh shit, that's why I'm doing that.
So you just mentioned
so we try to connect to that.
A bunch of examples, and all of them were based on other people, like an external motivation. And I find like that's how I get things done. I think like, oh, I need to do this for my family. I need to do this so my kids can have this. Like so many times the context that I give is for other people, and I'm wondering like internal validation, like is that a thing for you? Like do you
yeah. So there's two things to that, right? Because like I do try to get beyond that. So like if you were coaching me and I was like, well, because it makes my wife happy, that's not the end goal there. Then the question becomes, well, why is that important to you?
Right.
And then I start to go like, well, because when I feel like I'm doing a good job when my wife is happy and I feel like I'm being a good husband. And then the next question is just like, do you think you're being a good husband? I'm like, yeah, I do. It's like, oh, okay. So you already believe that you're being, yeah, I do feel like it. And then you start to get to that kind of shit. And they're like, wow. Or like, do
Right.
you think your friends feel comfortable when they come over? Like, well, I don't know. Or like, you start to ask that. And then you start to realize why people are feeling shame. Because most of the time, it always comes back to shame. Like,
Right. Yes.
I do this because I'm ashamed that I'm a mess, or I'm ashamed that I have this or that. So internal validation, it's interesting because it's a good motivator for us to do things for other people because we are naturally people pleasers. We really do like external validation, and as much as that's
Yep.
not the main goal, I remember, I'll never forget, I went to my therapist one day and I was like, dude, I'm so like messed up over this. I went down this rabbit hole. I was like, is it bad that I love external validation? And he's like,
Right.
first off, he's like, it's not bad. He's like, it can't be your main source of validation. Like, you need to learn to, and he's like, and you have been, you are internally validating yourself. But he's like, we are like pack animals, you know, like we grew, like we learned to like clan together as like early, you know, humans. And it's like, we rely on each other.
Right.
And the best way to tell if we're a part of that is to get some kind of validation that we're doing
That
a
makes
good job.
perfect sense to me, Ron. Like that makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah. And so you know, it's, should you be reliant on it? No. But like, it comes down to like advocating for yourself. It's just, if it's something that's important to you to get external validation, you know, let the people you love know. Gwen knows that. Gwen knows that every once in a while when she's like, "Hey, I'm really happy that you did that," like, it just makes me feel so good inside. And, I'm like,
Right.
and then I can ride on that for a while. And
Sure.
you know, do I need it? Eventually, yeah, but like, not really.
Right.
But yeah, it's because we're people pleasers, and I wonder, like, I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that we grew up trying to fit in, or like being told no. I don't think they ever did a study, but like on average, like an ADHD by the age of 12 is rejected 20,000 times more than a non-ADHDer.
Right.
And it's all of that rejection makes us constantly want to be like people to tell us that we're doing the right thing.
Right.
And that's hard. I think regardless, even if you started
so hard.
even if you started with a child and you were like, you know what? As a parent, like, I wonder this, like, if I have kids, I'm going to do my best to do the opposite of what happened to me. You can't prevent that because between what they're going to deal with in life, it's just, you're going to get that rejection. You can only prepare them for like how to handle it.
Right. So, all right, next step is RSD and shame. I mean, you've touched on it a few times. One thing I absolutely struggle with is RSD. It prevents me from doing a lot of things, and it's a motivator for a lot of things that I do, if that makes sense. And
what is it a motivator for?
So, like, the fear of like failure, total natural thing. But for me, my rejection sensitive dysphoria, like, I don't want to fail at things I try. So once I'm actually doing something, right? Like, RSD can prevent me from starting, but once I've started, like, the fear of failing at it really kind of makes me like a perfectionist, right? But it's because I don't want that judgment on the things that I'm doing or the things that I actually try really hard at. If I get rejected on that, it's like soul crushing, right? So when I've already committed to something like this show, right? Like, if somebody came in tomorrow and was like, that show is just terrible, you should stop, it would just destroy me, right? And it's because I'm just starting, I don't have traction, whatever, right? Like, that would really like set me back. But if somebody was like trying to encourage me to start, and they said, oh, you're going to be fantastic at it, like, my RSD would actually combat it the other way. So like, it motivates me a lot. It motivates me with how I interact with people online and stuff, because I don't want anybody to be upset with me. Right. So if you watch my content, it's all like, I say a lot of stuff and I yell at the camera a lot, but it's never directed at anybody. And it's always directed about the things in my life or the things that are going on with me. And I'm sure that's why a lot of people can connect with me and I don't get a lot of mean comments or anything like that. But that rejection sensitive dysphoria is the reason why, like, I'm not out here like fighting the good fight like Spaz and Lee and Patrick, right? And they're saying like, oh, you know, any kind of disinformation, we're gonna call out, we're gonna fight it, we're gonna combat it. I'm not that I literally can't do it. In fact, I've reached out to them on a few occasions like, hey, I would really appreciate you addressing this issue for me.
Yeah.
Because it's not something I can do.
Yeah. I'll remember the time, I forget his name now because it caused me so much like discomfort and like stress over like a weekend. It was the doctor dude that posted about like it being a superpower and like, and I did a video on it. And what's funny is I kept redoing it because I felt like I was too mean, right? I was like, I don't want to be a dick. Like I hate, and it's like, there's times that like I can be a dick when I'm in the right, like for sure. But like, I'm always worried. I'm worried that someone's going to not like me. Right. And that I think is 100% the RSD thing. And yeah, it's just, even when I wasn't that much of a dick about it, and the guy reached out to me and was like talking to me about it a little bit, like I was losing sleep at night over it.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's when I realized, I was like, I'm not this person. I can't do it. Like, I don't have the ability to do that. Do you have any good, like, because I keep thinking of like times where my RSD was so intense for a reason that I like look back at and I'm like, that was so ridiculous that I cared so much about that. But I have one instance. I'll say real quick and I want to hear yours. Because like I was in my 20s and I was at this Halloween party and it was like at this warehouse somewhere in LA. It was when we first moved here. And I was standing with some friends and I was in line at the bathroom. I had been drinking and there was a group of people in front of me and a girl dressed as Britney Spears. And cheesy dumb dad joke comes out and I was just like, oops, you did it again. And like I said that to her thinking I was hilarious, you know, and like she like turned at me and was so angry, and part of me thinks she probably misheard it because there's no reason to be angry at that, just maybe eye rolly for sure. And she's like, fuck you, and like ran off. And I like started crying like after, and I was like going around it like room. I was like, oh my God, she thinks I'm a terrible person. And I was like, this is somebody I'd never met in this party with like hundreds of people. And I was like, I'm an asshole, I'm terrible. And it was like hours where I just like sat in the corner and was just sad. Right. And like crying because I was like, this person hates me. I'm much better about that now, but like that kind of shit like affected me. And like, you don't want to be that person.
No,
like,
absolutely
not. I'm a terrible person.
I read a lot into things that just aren't there. Like just yesterday, I evaluated a house, like just a CMA on a house for somebody. I told my wife about it, and she goes, "Oh wow, houses in that neighborhood haven't been selling that high." And so immediately I started second guessing myself. Like, oh, right. Like there's nothing like even though I had the comps, I did all the work. My wife hasn't seen any of that. Right. Like, and suddenly like, oh, I'm a terrible real estate agent. Like I started like having a panic attack. Like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, this is not good. Like my client's not going to like it. Even though I had already talked to my client, they were thrilled. Like I just started like ruminating that whole thing, the self-doubt. And it's amazing how quick it comes crashing down, because as soon as I got home, like I was just telling my wife about how my day was, and then immediately like I shut down. I started that like awful process. Like I put a hoodie on, I bundled up, and I just kind of like sat on the couch and just I constantly doubted myself. But yeah, there's those moments where I experience most of all, but there are also moments where I've actually been like embarrassed or called out, or exactly what you're saying. Like,
oh yeah, when you've been,
like in high school, like I fell in front of like the whole class one time, just wiped out on my face, hit hard, right? And like the emotional torment I put on myself from that, like I ran into a classroom and like I shut the lights off and I just sat in that classroom.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, I don't know, I'll never recover from this. Like everybody laughed at me. Like this is just terrible, right? And like I didn't have any kind of diagnosis or anything. I just like, okay, this is what's going on. But like that fear of rejection is such a powerful thing that like we're desperate to avoid it sometimes to our own detriment, to where we become people pleasers and like where we just have to make things right. Like I remember around Christmas time, like my older siblings, I'm the youngest of 4, but none of them really got into the holiday spirit once they were a little bit older. A lot of them were just like shitty about the gifts they got, and I could see the effect it had on my parents. They tried so hard, like leading up to Christmas, and then like Christmas Day would come and they would be like, they try as hard as they can, and my siblings were just like, you know, like, oh, this is what I asked for, or like, okay, this is all right, like I'm going back to bed. And so me on Christmas morning, that was my showtime, right? I was like, oh my gosh, look at all of this amazing stuff, and like over the top,
like, happy. Make my parents feel so good about
and it wasn't that I wasn't like unhappy about it. Like it's Christmas and I'm a kid on Christmas, right? But I remember thinking like I need to show my parents like how much like I appreciate it, like how like much like it means to me, and like I need to help them on this shitty day for them, right? Like and so that's when I think of people pleasing and RSD. Like I didn't want to be that problem for them, right? I didn't want to have them feel that because of me. So I did literally, like they could have got me anything and I would have been like, oh my gosh, like this is the most amazing thing I've ever seen. Because they mean more to me than any kind of present or anything.
I got so good at like accepting gifts, even though I hate it. Just being like, no matter what it was, appreciating it. Because it's not about me. When I get gifts,
right.
I'm more concerned that, because I know how hard it is for me to pick out gifts for somebody, like I will stress about it so much that it'll be like the day of and I'll end up getting them something shitty because I'm like, no, it has to be perfect. They're not gonna like that.
Yeah, you wait till the last minute, but you've had this like grandiose idea of all the things that you can get, right? Like it's and then it's that decision paralysis that comes into play. All right, sorry, I had to interrupt, but
it's so funny. We just like, I think a lot of us too are so empathetic because we feel feelings so fucking hard, and emotions and all that stuff take over so much. Like what's really interesting about RSD, right? And when we have a call out or an embarrassing moment,
right?
Like those feelings become traumatic to us. And what's really interesting is, like, I don't know if you've ever been on like the mental part of TikTok where they start telling you how you have all this trauma and you're like, yep, that's me. And you're like, I don't understand. Like my childhood was not super traumatic,
right?
But like I have all these things. Like, why is that? And somebody explained to me, and I think it was, I forget his name. It might be Dr. Brian. I don't know if you follow him on TikTok.
I'm not sure.
He's fantastic in ADHD dude. He's talking about adverse child experiences. So like ACE is, and it's basically like because, and so we're so susceptible to trauma and all of these extra things because of how sensitive we are. So like we feel like something at a 10 that somebody else feels at a 6. So if we actually feel that shit, like that turns into a 10 on everyone's scale. So it becomes traumatic. We start having these negative self-talks because it was such a traumatic experience. And so like, yeah, it affects us. Like, oh my God, I'm a shitty this or whatever because of that one time. And so we're so much more susceptible to like single non-extreme experiences, like having a lasting effect on us.
Right. Yeah.
Like, and so, yeah.
I actually talked to people when I first started TikTok, and they're like, yep, that's the trauma. And I was like, what trauma? Like, what are you talking? Like, I lived a pretty good life. Like, I'm not going to lie. Like, I mean, from what, I mean, I only have the one perspective, right? Like, it wasn't like all rainbows and sunshine and stuff. Yeah. But, like, I never had, like, some kind of major event come in and
Right.
just wipe me out. You know, like that never happened to me. And so when people would be like, "That's a trauma response," I'd be like, or it's not. Like, I don't know. You know, like,
But it actually is. That's what's crazy.
Exactly,
Is like it
what you're
is.
saying.
You're reacting to shit traumatically, and so yeah, I don't know. I think understanding that that's what it is like step one, right? And so being like, all right, cool, that's what all this is. Like, you know, I always talk about how ADHD is an explanation, not an excuse.
Yep.
So it's like, all right, now that I know that, what do I need? How do I overcome it? Because I have to, right? Like I could sit here and complain about it, which I do all the time, but like that doesn't mean that I'm just gonna not do something about it.
Right.
It might be harder than it seems for some people that don't have ADHD, or like people without ADHD will be like, it shouldn't be that hard. Well, it fucking is.
Right.
And that's fine. I'm aware of that. That just means like, cool, I know I need more energy to tackle this because this is gonna cause me a lot of, like, I need to cut out 2 hours of my day to make a doctor's appointment. Like, I just do. Like, I know it. I know I need to plan it like around lunch. I need to eat. I need to make sure that my brain's clear and then feel okay about doing it. But I still get so fucking nervous to make a doctor's appointment because I think they're going to think I'm stupid because I don't know something, or I can't find my health insurance card, or they're going to be like, well, why are you sure about that? Like, we always think people think we're making stuff up. So it's like, no, I'm really, like, my arm is really bleeding profusely. Like, no. But
right. Well, and like, you always feel like you have to justify it, right? I was just having a conversation on the Discord server with employers. And somebody shared, like, they asked for time off from their boss, and their boss didn't ask them what for, and they just gave them the time off. And I shared that I always felt like I had to justify asking for 100%. That time. So, like, even if they didn't ask, like, what are you doing? It's like, hey, I need time off so I can go on this vacation. Or, like, I need time off to do this because of this, because of this. And, like, I know you're going to be slammed, but I really kind of need some time. Yeah. And it's more like asking permission from them to borrow my time than, like, hey, this is mine, I'm taking it. Right? Mm-hmm. And it's exactly that feeling. That's so funny that you brought that up.
I think it really does have to do with the fact that people didn't believe us. You know, like, think about, I always tell, I try to tell parents that, like, when your kid says they don't know, you have to believe them.
Right.
You know, if your kid says, like, if you're like, why didn't you do your homework? And they're like, I don't know. I'm like, I don't think they know.
Right. Right.
And, you know,
right.
Instead,
like, right? What the fuck? Oh, you just blew my mind. Yes.
Like, so like the first step is being like, okay, imagine not knowing why you can't do it. That's a scary ass fucking place. So instead of getting mad at them for it, be like, holy fuck, that must be so scary to have no fucking idea why you can't do something that's so easy for someone else.
Right.
I feel you, man. God, that's got to be so scary. Like, how do you need what? Let's try to figure out a way to help you.
Holy crap. Yeah.
Like, that's how you got to do it.
I just got waves of memories just flooding my brain, Ron. Like, why can't you do it? Right? I mean, just apply yourself. Like, come on. Like, this isn't even that hard. Like, like, I don't know. But then you internalize it, right? And so by the time I was supposed to be graduating high school, I was like, what the hell's the point? I can't do this. Like, it's not something that's going to happen for me.
Yep. And like, you turn into someone, though, right? Like, you become like a thing. Like,
you live the role that's kind of assigned to you.
Yeah. Like, I was someone that was always like a mess, or I always was, you know, oh, well, there's Ron, like, interrupting everybody and talking a bunch. And so I just became that.
Right. I became the absentee stoner kid in high school. That's what I grew into. And I remember people telling me, like, oh, are you high? I used to get it all the time. Are you stoned? And I didn't start smoking weed until like 17, right? But this is like when I was a freshman in high school. I had teachers like pull me aside, like, have you been, like, no. And I still remember that. And I grew into that expectation. Like, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, we are what you either fight against your stereotype or you play into it. And
Right.
so like
Right.
that's what ends up happening.
Well, and so
Like
many
you either
times, like you see that with the gifted and talented kids, right? Like
yeah.
it's the exact same thing. They get this label, and then they feel like they have to live up to these expectations and stuff. I totally agree with that. Ah, like
Yeah.
phew, Ron, you're rocking my world here. I wasn't really prepared for
Dude, I
this.
wasn't even ripping that. All right. Anyway, so yeah, it's like, and it sucks too because I think what ends up happening, and like I always bring up the explanation versus excuse thing because I think people that don't have ADHD look at the fact that first they don't understand what we're going through, which makes sense. They're not going
They're
through it,
never
right?
gonna, right? Yeah.
Right. So they don't understand what we're going through, and so they see us getting special treatment. They're like, that's bullshit.
Right.
And because it's an invisible disorder, right? If we had a broken leg and couldn't walk, they wouldn't be like, fuck you for needing a wheelchair. Like I want a wheelchair. Like that wouldn't be the case.
Right.
And so it's like, yeah, it's we get certain, things to help us, but like it works the same way around. Like there are things that we're really good at that people without ADHD aren't. And it's just the same way. It's just so like unique usually the things that we're good at where
Yeah.
people are like, wow, like somebody will be amazed at something we do. And especially when we're growing up, like we do something amazing that gets you into like gifted and talented, right? Because either you're like you have like great communication skills, or you're someone that's good at one thing and there's like, wow, you're gifted.
Yep.
And so they put you into this category and they assume that you're good at everything else, because most people that aren't ADHD, the like level of like what they can handle like moves up and it's more in a line, whereas with us things we're really good at but then we're really bad at other shit, and our like intelligence level is more like that. So yeah, they're like, well, if you can't do that, like wait, you're like reading at a 5th grade level when you're in 1st grade, but you can't tie your shoes and everyone can tie their shoes. What the fuck's wrong with you? You just don't care. And you're like, no, I don't know how to do that. Like, I don't know.
No, I
can
totally
go on forever about it.
That's like, no, it's exactly that. And so much of it is, our brain chasing that dopamine. I kind of want to shift gears. We talked a lot about the negative sides. But let's talk about chasing the dopamine a little bit. Tell me about all the hobbies you've jumped from in your life.
Jeez, man. At the beginning of the pandemic, I bought a drum set. That was fun.
How long did that last?
I got like decent at it really quick, and then like I think the learning curve, starts to get to where it's like I'm not progressing anymore. Like I got better. Like every time I played, it was like noticeably better. And then I hit a point to where I was like in that standstill, and I'm like, well, I'm done with this.
Right.
I mean, I played tons of sports in my life, and was always pretty instantly good at it. But that's what it was. Whenever I wasn't getting the reward for, that, like I wasn't like feeling like, wow, I'm getting better, when it starts to like bottom out, or like, what's the word, when it starts to level off, that's what it is. When it starts to level off, I am like less interested. So like I was really good at baseball, and I was on like a state championship team in high school, but when I got to that level, I was working hard and not seeing much improvement. So then I just kind of stopped, and I was just doing the minimum to just be on the team, and that was it.
Yeah.
And now I like love it. Now I play softball all the time and everything. But so yeah, tons of sports. I started climbing right before the pandemic, so doing bouldering.
Oh,
that's still doing that. That's a lot of fun.
Dang, that's some serious stuff.
Bouldering's so fun, dude. Gwen and I were doing it for a while. It's the great thing about bouldering is like there's again the immediate like gratification.
Hold on, all right. Did you watch Free Solo? And then you're like, okay, I'm following the thought process here.
So like, but no, it wasn't for. So I watched Free Solo before I started bouldering, and then a buddy of mine was going a lot, and we were like, hell yeah, we'll go check it out. And I fell in love with it right away because they have like the different levels of it. So they call it variations. So it's like V1, V2,
Okay.
V3, like all the way up. And every couple times I would be able to see like actually see progress because I'm like, wow, I can now do a V3 or I
That's
can
so
do a
interesting.
V4.
Yeah.
So that was what the reward is. I was watching another episode last week when you were talking with Adam about like competition and like being competitive with
Uh-huh.
stuff.
Yeah.
And for me, like so I was listening to that and I was like, I was only competitive when I believed I could do it. Like, if that makes sense. Like,
I can see that. Absolutely. Like when you feel like you have a chance to be competitive,
yeah,
right? Like
yeah, because like, and
that's a great way
so
to put it. Yeah, I feel
I
that.
don't know, like, yeah, because it's like losing sucks, man.
Right.
Like,
Like why try?
especially when you don't have a shot, like someone's gonna beat you. I'm like, fuck this.
Right.
I,
Well, because then
I
it
know
starts
there's people
feeling like it's all set up against you, right?
rejection,
Like
man, too. Yeah.
like,
So yeah, I didn't actually get competitive till after high school, but yeah, I would say like all these things I'm trying, like bouldering. I love playing softball. Um, I've played like two hand in some leagues over the past couple of years. Um, I started playing D&D.
yeah.
Like that was like a big thing that I
Amazing.
was like, oh, I'm gonna fall into this shit. Video games. Gwen and I just started playing Elden Ring, which
How
is
is it?
so much fun.
Is it?
Oh my
I
god,
haven't
yeah.
even checked it out. I'm
Oh my
like
god. The first like couple hours we played it was so stressful because it's hard. It's
oh, is
fucking
it?
hard. Like the learning curve for it's really hard. And we almost gave up on it, but then like we hit that moment where like, okay, I get it, and now that's like all we play. Um so yeah, what else? What are some other
So
hobbies I have? I'm like looking around. I
while I
have like all
have
my hobbies.
like I can see like my camera and stuff. While we're on it, like I want to talk
Yeah.
about like that reward system, of visual reward, anything
Yeah.
like that, because I was telling people I just remodeled a house, like a basement of a house, and it was so rewarding for me to be able to see the progress I made each day that it
Yeah.
really helped me. Whereas like, when I was in banking, I'd work on a computer and like everything would just go in a nice, neat little file, and like I didn't have the proof of work, like the proof of labor, the proof of effort, to kind of keep me going. And I found that like when I was working with my hands or like
Right.
actually building something, I had like that visual reminder of progress that really helped me stay motivated, because I did that for 4 months. And sure, there was some downtime in there, like we had the holidays and stuff, but I really do believe like that kept me on track more than like if somebody would just have been like, hey, come in and build a wall here and then go to the next house and like, put in a shower here, where I wouldn't be able to track all of the progress that I've made around me. Do you think there's anything to that kind of validation?
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's interesting. They talk a lot about like rewards don't work for ADHDers. And like I get it to a point, but I don't think it's the actual reward that we care about. I think it's the validation that we get from it,
Yeah.
right? So it's not that, like I would say it's like money's great, right? And like yes, in a way I'm driven by money, but like money has never been a great primary motivator for
No.
me.
No.
And I feel stupid saying it. It's like it should, right? Like money's what gets me to do shit. But like I have to like immediately like getting paid for something doesn't do it for me.
Right.
I obviously
I
need
could
it.
see that. Yeah, no, absolutely.
But like validation is really the thing that drives us. It's feeling like we're doing a good job, and sometimes we need that visual of what it is. Um, the chasing the dopamine thing is so interesting, right? Because like I said before, like we have the things that motivate us are interest, novelty, and urgency. And so I'm like the validation part of it is something that isn't involved in there. I mean, I guess it could be an interest, like it finds, something interesting,
Yeah, I can see
but
that.
I think it has to do with our emotion, right? Like we so often like in coaching we talk about how we feel, and we don't ever connect to that part of us. Like usually we're just kind of go go go,
Right.
but like we naturally move towards things that feel good. And so if we're feeling good while we're doing shit, like we're going to continue to do it. A lot of times when we're trying to break people of habits, you have to like take a look at how you feel when you do that and try to replace it with the same feeling doing something else. Because we just get stuck in a pattern because that's how we know how to get that. So
Yeah.
like we don't have any instruction manual, and like our brain's like, hey, when I do this, I'm feeling and I fucking want that feeling.
Right.
And so how do we get that feeling another way? And that shit's hard to do. But like, yeah, reward by like feeling good about something. Fuck yeah, that shit works.
Yeah, I don't know if I would even call it like a reward. Like the validation
Yeah.
is probably a closer word, but for me, it's like you experience so much rejection and saying like you can't do something, but to have like the evidence to the contrary is
That you're proud of
very,
yourself.
it
There you go,
justifies
yeah.
yourself, right? Like I don't even know if it's
Yeah.
proud, because I don't know if I've ever been like really proud of anything I've really done, because I'm always on to like the next thing. I don't take time to like even reflect on the stuff that I've done in the past, right? Like it doesn't mean anything to me, and like it's cool that I did it, but like,
Are you proud of yourself for what you made here? For the dysfunction and for all these things that you made?
I don't think I made it. Like I've had so much help along the way that this is more like a group
See?
thing. So
But
I'm proud. I'm proud of the community that I'm part of. But for me, like a lot of this feels like I just kind of fell into it. And
what
like
one thing that's
people
one thing
follow
that's really
me
interesting.
because like I'm just kind of like off the wall. But like they could take me or leave. Like just like you were saying, like with your friends, you thought like they were getting paid to be your friends. Like that is very similar to the way I view my followers online. Like, oh, they're just here for a show, like.
But here's what's interesting, right? And this is going to be a little bit of Coach Ron, but I want to say this because
Okay.
I think it's really important.
Sure.
We learned something that has stuck with me a lot, and the saying is, God, I'm gonna butcher it, but it's like that comes easy is easily taken for granted, or something like that. But it's this idea that like the thing that you're innately good at, you aren't going to recognize as being great.
Right.
And like that's what makes it great, because of how easy it is for you to just be, authentic and be able to be a spokesperson for people and be super validating, and like people like relate to you, and like that shit, even though it wasn't hard for you and you just fell into it, is something to be proud of. It's great.
Thank
It's
you,
what
man.
makes you awesome.
Like,
Yeah,
I really do. I like. It's not like I think anything terrible about the things I'm doing
Right.
here. Like I love what I'm doing. I really
Yeah.
do get all the dopamine I can out of this thing. Like trust me. But like there's like a block where it's like
for sure. I got you.
everybody's doing this. Anybody could do this. Like I literally just started recording on my camera one day, and now we're here talking, and it's been a fun journey and a great journey. But like, there's nothing special about anything I did. I just got on here and started like, you know what I mean? Like,
Okay, well, I'll tell you, I'm very special, like, and that's like it's so funny because like I do the same shit, man. Like I look at like what I've done so far with coaching, and I keep going like, well, I've done like the easy parts and like the things that come naturally to me, and so often I have to stop and look back and be like, I'm really proud of myself where I've come from, and like what it is that I've done for people, and like think about the messages that you get from people.
Right.
Like, so
yeah, for me, that's the biggest reward, right? Like you mentioned those messages. Yeah. I keep track, or it's somewhere. I think I'm at like 60 messages of people telling me that I was the reason they sought supports. Like, come on.
Do that for one person,
but
so
right, but that's like it's not. It's like them. Like I'm so proud of them for
sure.
finding those supports. Like and I can't make it click. Like I want to. I hear what you're saying. It makes sense to me.
Right.
But it's not gonna click up here.
Do you think it has to do with the fact that we believe, and I've always thought this, that like in order to be proud of something, you had to work hard for it, or like you have to do something that you didn't expect yourself to do. Like what
Right.
do you think
Yeah,
it
you
has
have
to
to
do
go
with?
above and beyond. But for me, like I would say like it's more because I think that's probably the best way I could explain it is the way you put it. But
Right.
like
I know it's hard. I trust me, I get it. It's just like the thing is I look at other people and I'm easily proud of them
yeah,
for things, right?
sure, and
Like,
appreciative and all of those things.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so like a lot of the things that I think have helped me, and like I started telling this to Gwen, but like when you have a problem doing something for yourself, right? Because you're like, I want to do something for other people. The best thing to do is treat yourself like a third person,
Yeah.
like almost kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing, and
Yeah.
be like,
Gamify it a little bit. Yep.
yeah, and you start going like, I want to be my best friend today. Like, what is like? How can I be? Would I be proud of my best friend if they did? Like, if some your best friend started doing this shit and they did this, you'd be like, dude, this is so
Oh
fucking awesome.
yeah.
I'm so proud of
Oh
you.
yeah.
So just remember that shit, dude. And sometimes it's okay to do that. It doesn't make you
Right.
selfish. It feels good. It feels weird to feel good by your own self, but that's where like self esteem comes from. So food for
Self-esteem.
thought.
There's a whole nother
Oh,
can of
food for
worms.
thought,
But
man. No,
no,
we're
I
fucking words
I
about it.
totally get what you're saying. But I think a lot of it has to do for me with the stuff I'm good at. It just came so natural, right? So easy. But
Mhm.
like the hard stuff like was so fucking hard that like it just made the easy stuff like not any kind of anything, right? Like I only focused on the hard because that shit's hard, right? Like, and so when I do the easy stuff, I don't think of it as good, I think of it as easy, right? I'm not thinking of it as, wow, look at all that. I'm thinking, okay, the amount of effort I had to put in on that was pretty fucking easy, right? And then the stuff I'm
Great.
struggling with, I'm thinking of like the amount of effort I'm putting into like trying to get myself up off the couch and like bundle socks
Sure.
together and put those in the drawer
Fuck
is
that.
fucking hard, you know? And for
Yeah.
me, like I don't judge my success or anything. Like I really don't. It's more like an effort based
Sure.
formula like that doesn't
Sure.
even measure success or like being proud of anything. It's more like
Yeah.
the effort I have to put in. Like right now, like I'm putting in like probably 80 to 90 hours a week trying to do like all this fun stuff and doing all kinds of fun real estate stuff, and I love
Yeah.
all of it, and it just seems easy to me even though I'm staying up till 3 in the morning. Like no big deal, right? But when I wake up and I have to like organize my son's room or something, that shit is fucking hard, you know? And it feels like it takes me the same amount of energy,
Yeah.
right? So when I'm judging things, it's not like be proud of this or not be proud of this. It's just like, I can't believe like it took me that much energy to accomplish so little.
Yeah.
And so I'm a very negative thinker about myself, like internally, obviously. I've been going to therapy and talking with counselors, so we're good. But like for me, it just seems natural. The stuff I can do, like you said, reading at like I was at like a college level in 5th grade, right?
Wow.
And it's like I've never struggled with reading, so I've never thought that was like a thing to be proud of, right? That's just a thing that I can do, right? But other people would be like, wow, that's fucking impressive, right? For me, it was just like, to be honest with you, I thought every kid, like in my class, was like in on that level. Obviously, they weren't,
Yeah.
but like when I think about myself, I put myself in the middle, at the average. I consider myself like an average person all the way across the board, right? So when I think about like the things I'm really good at, I bring those down to the average, and I expect everybody to be able to be good at those things, right? And then the things I'm bad at, I, I, I still think I'm pretty. Yeah, well, I didn't know what to say, but I really do kind of bring myself up a little bit,
Yeah.
right? And I can give myself some forgiveness, like, hey, I'm just average at this, right? But so much of like since my diagnosed at 33, I'm 34, has been trying to identify the things I'm good at because I've never really tried to identify them before.
Dude, there's I'll send you this thing. It's really great, but it helps you like find your like innate character strengths. It's called like Via Character, and like I use it so much in coaching because it's for that reason. We look at these things that we're innately good at, like that make us who we are, and then we like pass them off as like, well, that's easy. Of course, like it's not a big deal.
Right.
And then we look at the things that we struggle with that are hard for us, and we're like, that's the thing that matters.
Right.
And a lot of times, like whenever an ADHDer takes this, usually the bottom is like self-regulation, perseverance, like shit that like we've heard our whole lives is what like to put on a resume, you know, like I was like, I'm not gonna write a resume and be like, shows up late.
Right.
You know, shirts never ironed. Like right. Shit like that. I don't put that up. Instead I go like, oh yeah, I'm the fucking best. I'm gonna do this.
Right. And
then they hire me, and for 2 months to be that thing that I put on the resume, and then after a while I'm just like, I can't fucking do it anymore. And so it makes sense why we do it. But like the thing that I've learned, and that's been really helpful for me, is those things that I'm easily good at, innately good at, the things that come easy to me, when I put those things into the things I'm bad at, it makes the bad things easier. Yeah. So it's like, I don't know. I get it. It's totally what a lot of what we do in coaching, right? It's like there's so much to it, like accept that we struggle with as ADHDers, and we like it is by no means something to like. I mean, I celebrate I'm an ADHDer, but that's just because I'm an advocate, right?
Right.
But like we never focus on the good, and we never focus on things that we can do well, and unfortunately like things that you focus on grow bigger. So it's like if you don't admit that you're like, you know what, I am fucking good at this and it comes easy to me.
How much do you think that is like deflection, right? Like I've had to deflect things away from me my whole life. Like I like thinking back, like I spent so much time in my life trying not to stand out in any way.
Yeah.
In any way.
Dude, you should ask Gwen, because Gwen, like as a dancer and as an actor, where you're supposed to stand out and be like, me, choose me, has always been like the person that like goes to the back and is like, no, you go.
Yeah.
You. And I don't know if that has to do with RSD, because if we can sense, right, like think about it as a kid, like whenever you were given praise, there was always the sense that somebody was jealous, or that somebody was like looking at you like upset or whatever, and you could tell, right? Like whenever you won something or were picked in class, you were like, fuck, everyone hates me now, like and you don't want that. And I don't point now, like, and I think the world, I root for everyone and I encourage everyone, and I think, you know, competition's interesting. Like I know we used to live in the society where we were so competitive with our, like, I don't know, like if you were at work with somebody, it's like you wanted to do better than them, you know, and like that was part of it. But we're in a world now where it's changing into this, like, no, you being successful does not affect me whatsoever. In fact, it helps me. Like, you know, it inspires me.
Yes.
And so I think being able to sit there and it's so hard and awkward, but just be like, you know what, I'm really proud. And like, it's really changed for me a lot, where I've had to take a step back, because there's moments I look at my coaching business and I'm like, fuck, I'm not doing enough. I don't have enough this. I'm not doing enough that. I need to get this, blah, blah, blah.
Sure.
And when I stop and like take a step back, I'm like, God, where I and what I'm able to do is so amazing, and I'm really proud of myself for it. You know, I took a class and went to every, like, it was like 11, you know, twice a week straight, and I went to every single class online. And that's is a big fucking deal to me.
Yeah.
Because, like, I dropped out of classes so often because there's no fucking way I could sit through a class, right? But it was super important to me, and I went to every single class. I even went when I was on vacation in New Jersey, and like people were eating dinner, and I was outside of my laptop in class. Like I was like, that's
powerful.
This is important to me, and I care. And like I look back on it, and I'm like, you know what? I'm fucking proud of that. It was hard, And then a lot of the things that are easy for me and the way that I'm like, coming up with like group coaching classes and trying to get like together, I'm fucking really excited about that. And I'm proud that I'm doing it. And it's scary. And I'm like, dude, this is great. I'm really impressed with myself because 5 years ago, me would have fucking never been able
amazing,
to.
Dude.
And so like, it's great. And like, I look at you and the fact that you have come so far. Like, you're so inspirational when it comes to you quitting drinking, and like, you are proud of yourself. You post those pictures of like you losing weight. It's fucking amazing.
But I am proud of the fact that I overcame that. But
this is
I still deal.
We're gonna.
I still deal with tons of shame about it. Right? Like tons of shame about it. But again, I'm talking about that for other people. Like, I'm proud internally, right, of that. Like, that's the hardest thing I ever had to do. But I earned the right to be proud of that in my mind with the amount of torture it is to get sober. How difficult, like, how hard that shit is. I'm also very proud of the fact that I went undiagnosed for 33 years. Having no idea. Like, I thought the drinking was hard, but the undiagnosed ADHD, that was a whole lifelong thing, right? So, like, obviously that's the hardest thing I've ever had to do. I'm proud of the fact that I turned out okay, like, in spite of all of that, But, like, even when I think about why, like, it's my wife, it's my family, it's like all of the other things, like, I can be really proud of the things I do, but I only see it through other people. I see, like, what I can do for my family now. I see, like, myself being, like, a great father for my kids, like, and giving them support systems. But that's where I see it. It's not exactly I'm proud of myself for the thing. I'm proud of myself for the life I'm giving other people, for my ability to help or my ability to connect or whatever it is. Yeah. It's so little about me. I honestly, for somebody who lives in my own brain, I don't think about myself hardly at all. Right. Dude,
I hear you. I feel you, man. Like, that's fucking crazy how I wonder, right? Like, I don't know. Like, there was a time too I thought people thought I was being selfish all the time.
Oh, me too. Well, and I've had people tell me, like, you're so, like, cocky. And I had to be like, hold on, my self-confidence, I can't even get myself to speak in meetings. All right? Cocky is not a thing. But when I'm doing it for somebody else, like one of my clients at work, no problem. Right? Like, I'm all over it. Like, or if I know the information I'm talking about is truthful and, like, I'm confident about the facts that I know, no problem. I will defend myself to the death in those situations. And like, I can be a little cocky about it, I guess, but it's not any kind of, like, when I think like cocky, I think of internalizing things that you probably shouldn't. And I don't think I'm doing that, right? I trust the information, the knowledge that I have, and it comes out excitedly and defensively sometimes. But it's not anything like I know more than you. It's just, hey, I know this information and you don't. Like, here's this information.
I do think it has to do with, like, the RSD part. Like, you've been cocky, so, like, someone's called you that, right?
Oh, yeah.
And, like, I know Gwen always says, I don't want to show off. And I was like, Gwen, I've never seen you in my entire show off, ever. Right. Like, you're always so, like, no, you go. And that makes me go, like, someone one time, like, told her she was showing off, and it was the RSD thing of, like, just cut deep, and it's like, I'm never going to be that person. Yeah. And, like, for you, it might have been like, I'm never going to be, like, cocky is so painful. The idea of you being, like, think about you being cocky and, like, how, like, disgusting that probably feels.
Oh, yeah. Like, and because, I think of, like, like a Chad or something, like, there's like,
oh, I never want to be
look Chad, at me, right? Oh. Like, and I just can't ever be that person. Like, I always try to support other people, like, raise up other people, because, like, I can be helpful and they can get what they need, right? Like, they get their needs met. Like, that's great. That's a win for me. Like, I don't ever want to be like the guy driving like the flashiest car. One, because as soon as I buy a car and I drive it for a month, it's just a car again, right? It doesn't matter if I'm driving a Lambo, whatever. Like, as soon as that month is over of the new shiny thing wearing off, it's just a car, and I'm going to be banging that shit into, like, poles and stuff, like, you know, not paying attention. But, like, it's like somebody in the comments said, like, you can do for others what you can't do for yourself.
And you know, the interesting, and I'm, again, not to make this like a coaching session, but it's the idea that, like, you know how people say, like, well, you got to take care of yourself before you can take care of others. Like, if you're not eating healthy and you're not like taking care of what you need, you're not going to be as good for another person. Or like, love yourself before you love others, kind of shit. And I think the same thing goes with, like, you know, if you being proud of yourself meant you were able to lift up other people even more than you currently are, would you try to be more proud of yourself?
Oh yeah, 100%.
But that's the thing. Like, if that's the answer, you're like, well, wait, okay. So I don't know. That's something that I've learned. Like, if I wasn't able to be proud of myself, I wouldn't be where I'm at in this business where I'm able to help people. So I'm like, cool, that's how I did it.
Right.
And I try to instill that in others, and like, in order to do that, like, I'm not going to be a hypocrite and not do it for myself. So
right.
It's still fucking hard. I still
get
embarrassed so easily. I still talk shit about myself to my head, even though I'm like such a, like, you know, and it really shouldn't. I would say that's my toxic trait, is when people talk shit about themselves, I'm like quick to call them out on it and like tell them to knock it off.
Right.
But like, I do the same thing in my own head. So
sure. So all right. So we touched on toxic traits. What are like some of the most positive traits that you have? What are like your strengths that you feel like you have?
I have good perspective.
Obviously, everybody in the chat's like, duh, like, we just watched an hour and a half of you. Yeah, absolutely.
I trust my intuition, and I have good social intelligence. And my number one and number two traits are probably kindness and love. Nice. I care so much about everyone else. So much so that I try not to look like I do. Like, it's like this back and forth thing, right?
Sure.
Where I'm like, God, sometimes I'm like, wow, am I a tryhard right now? Am I like doing way too much? Like, right. I'm gonna dial it back.
Well, I'm sure it's got to be difficult with you and seeing all like the toxic positivity coming from like ADHD coaches on TikTok, and you're feeling very positive about other people, right? But you don't want to like overinflate anybody. So like, trying to reel that back, there's got to be a happy medium when you're just trying to be yourself, right?
I learned early on, because I didn't understand toxic positivity when I first got onto TikTok, and as someone whose parents used a ton of toxic positivity for me, and realized after learning about it, and I'm like, oh, no fucking wonder I hate myself.
Right, like when you don't meet the positive message,
right?
Oh, it's crippling.
That's
right?
What happens. Like, you're like, oh, you can do anything, and it's like, well, apparently I can't.
Right, I've been trying.
Piece of shit, right? And so like, that's when it like finally hit home to me what toxic positivity is, and then the level of privilege that I have is something that I've like definitely come to terms with. I was like, I'm fucking lucky. I'm a white dude who is outgoing, and people typically like to listen to when and like, I can usually make good first impressions. Like, that has gotten me a really, really long way in life. Yep. And like, in fact, that's how I've overcome a lot of my ADHD, because I've been able to talk myself out of situations. And like, my
mom called me Squeaker, because I would squeak out. I'm not even joking. She'd call me Squeaker because I'd always get in trouble and then be able to get my way out of it.
Figure it out. Yeah. Like, how many times I've said, like, if I wasn't white, I'd be in jail. Like, I know that. Like, there's definitely plenty of times that have happened. And, there's so many situations where I'm like, yeah, I realize that. And I have to constantly check myself. It doesn't mean that I don't, do the best that I can for myself.
Of course.
But yeah, I definitely have to check myself on that. And so when I first got onto TikTok, I posed a question to ADHD TikTok asking, you know, the difference between being like wanting people to want better for themselves and to having a positive mindset and to being toxically positive and saying things are a superpower. And it, man, I got stitched by like every popular creator there was. It was incredible. And
Right.
like, who, I think, Leslie Seide like stitched it, and like a couple other people stitched it. And I learned so much by being like, I don't fucking know why. I'm looking at this video, I'm like, I like it, and then I'm looking at this video, I was like, I like it, but people hate it, and I'm like, why? What's the deal?
Right.
And so I learned so much and researched a ton. And when I went to coaching classes, I was like calling people out left and right of being
That's
like, listen,
awesome.
because like it is the best way to like coach someone on ADHD is a strength-based approach, and to build self-confidence. And to do that, you do have to focus on the positives. Um, and it doesn't mean ignoring the negatives. It means accepting them, but moving on from them, which is hard to do.
Right.
But there's a fine line, and I've even made a video of like the difference between being positive and being toxically positive. It's things like, stop being negative, good vibes only is a toxically positive thing.
Oh yeah.
But being like, fuck, I know how hard that is for you. Like I'm sure,
Commiserating.
like
Yeah.
I wish I could, help you with that. Is there anything I could do? Or like, when you're ready, let's come up with some solutions for that. And it's like the thing that we always tell parents for their kids is like, first believe them, meet them at their level, and then ask them what they want. And if they might not know, and
Right.
like, cool, let's think about that. Let's try to think about that the next time this happens and come up with like a new plan. And that's what it is. That's being positive, but also validating.
Right.
And it's hard. And there's definitely times where frustration kicks in for parents. And that's usually when the toxic positivity comes, is you're just frustrated.
Right.
And so you're just like, just fucking do it.
Right. You can do
And
this. Now you can,
yeah.
It's not
and
that
it's
big
hard,
a
right?
deal,
Because
right?
you want
Yeah.
to, it doesn't come from a bad place, but
Right.
it does have difficult consequences. So.
I think that's awesome. You asked that question and you were able to, learn from the responses. Like, and I really like the fact that you brought up privilege. I say quite a bit. Like, I think, being white is a white male is a reason why I went undiagnosed, is because people would make excuses for my behavior. They would, just kind of write it off like, he's just an average kid, right? Like, he's not really harming anything. He's not really helping his case all that much. And like, by the time I was in high school and I like dropped out of high school, basically, like I was just like this stoner washout that nobody really attributed like my behavior towards any kind of thing except for me smoking weed, right? Well, and then I went into like 10 years worth of alcoholism. And so I purposely didn't seek any kind of help or anything because I didn't want anybody to know about that, right? Talk about shame and hiding that. But all along the way, like, people gave excuses for me, right, that I don't think I would have received had I been a minority, right? Like, that's just the facts of it. So when I think about privilege, I think a lot about that scenario itself where, if I hadn't had ADHD or like, that wasn't part of who I was at that time, I would have literally just gotten excuse after excuse after excuse to fail up in life, right? Without really deserving any of that, right? And so it's actually helped me understand privilege a lot better, getting this diagnosis and reflecting on those events, Like, I think about when I went to court, people call me squeaker. I wouldn't be squeaking, right, if it wasn't this complexion, right? Like, I think it's very important that we talk about that. I'm really glad you brought it up. Super awesome of you to do that. Thank you for that. I think I think we don't spend enough time talking about our own privilege within our own community, right?
Totally, especially in our community. And like, I think, um, I don't know the statistic off the top of my head, but I do know that it's something like 50% of people in jail have ADHD.
Right.
And the amount of them that are people of color, because I was talking to this girl that I went to high school with who is a physician in Arizona, and she works on the reservation. And she said, the amount of kids um, that she is diagnosing that are from low income families. And like that's what she's decided she's doing. She's like low income
It's
families,
amazing.
people of
Yeah.
color. And she's like, I'm diagnosing so much of them that have just been like, oh, you're a problem child. Fuck you. You're going to go into the system eventually. You're going to be in like, the juvenile courts, or you're going to go to jail or what have you, because that's what happens. And whereas you've got white kids that are acting out and being whatever, and they're like, we're going to check them out and see what's wrong with them.
Right.
And that's what happened. That's why a lot of people of color have struggle with being an
Well, of
ADHD. And then
course, right?
also the amount of money that you need to help you during it.
Right.
And so that happens too.
That's how.
And
Yeah. There's also a socioeconomic privilege that goes hand in hand, right? Like I came out of pocket from my diagnosis. I was fortunate enough to be in a position that I could pay almost $3,000 to
yeah,
make sure, right, and start getting that help. But we see it constantly on TikTok. Is self-diagnosis is a thing because it's
sure.
so cost prohibitive to actually get the
Yes.
care that we need.
Right. And the thing that I've said to people, because there are some professionals that don't believe in self-diagnosis, and usually when you explain that part of it, of how it's so difficult for some people without privilege to get a diagnosis, that they kind of start to understand. They always have this fear that it's like, well, then they're going to self-medicate. I was like, they're going to fucking self-medicate
Right.
whether they're diagnosed or
Right.
not.
Right.
And, like, it's not like you can get a prescription because you say you have ADHD. Like, you have to prove it,
Right.
So, like,
And you
there's
can't.
really,
Yeah.
yeah,
You
the negatives for being self-diagnosed is really not that much. But the thing that I've said to people so much, and like I've had people call me up and they're like, well, I don't know that I have ADHD, but like a lot of the videos you make are like totally like resonate and like blah blah. And I was like, here's the deal, right? Whether you have ADHD or not, if our community and the videos that any of us put out are helpful, or you feel like you need help, then fucking get help. Like that's what this comes down to, right? Whether you need enough help for a diagnosis, anything in your life, if you need help and something's difficult for you, you can't do something, we've always felt like we have to fucking deal with it. Like, don't complain.
Right.
It's like, fuck that.
Right.
Complain. Like, I'm struggling with this. Why aren't we what furthers us as human beings and like in evolution is to make things easier for them. We're constantly trying to become more efficient and grow and like make things easier for people. So like fucking we should make things easier for people.
Right.
Right? Even if you don't believe in ADHD, if I'm going like, hey, I have a hard time, doing this, why wouldn't you want to help me with it then?
Right.
And like that's what it comes
right.
down to.
Right.
Like
that's
so yeah.
That's people's own internal motivations. Like when they don't align with yours, like they become combative, and that's something I've never really understood.
Yeah.
Right? Like
it's a competition. I think it's a competition.
Well, and I've said it before. Like I'm not competitive, so maybe that's it.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
yeah. But it goes back to like just because someone is given in something, right? Like I think it comes to like, well, why don't I get some? It turns into the, like, why not me?
Right.
Or
it's that scarcity mindset that that they're taking something from me by them receiving this.
Right. And like the more we lift other people up, the more we're gonna lift ourselves up. So.
Amen. Amen. Yes, absolutely. I mean, that's what we're doing here, right? Like that's and I will say, like in our group, we do a lot of that. Like, I'm not, for those of you wondering. Oh, there's my camera. for those of you wondering, like I am not. Ron is not my ADHD coach. He is a very good friend of mine. We play D&D together. I would love to have him be my ADHD coach, but I can't get any kind of schedule consistent to where I can schedule anything.
150 hours.
Right.
So,
but like we do a very good job of supporting each other in that D&D group. We always celebrate each other's accomplishments. We say, "Oh, I saw this video that you did. Amazing." Like if you go look at my TikTok videos, you'll see Ron and Gwen and Adam and Lee all over my comments section, and I'm doing the same thing for them. Because like we know how hard it is for us, but we can celebrate 100%. The people we care about all the time. We can scream it from the rooftops, right? It's super easy.
It's funny you posted a video about how like, hey, just because I like your video doesn't mean I watched it, and I fucking was like exactly like I tried. Don't get me wrong, right? But like there's times I watch TikTok without volume. I don't know if you ever
I do that. Yeah. When I'm bored, I'll scroll and just like people and try to boost them and stuff.
Right. I'm like, so I'll always like, I'm going to like it. I'm going to hit the share button and copy link 3 times. Exactly. I'm going to comment. I'm going to do whatever it is. Like, let's do this. And like, I don't even know what you said. You may have been like, Ron's a fucking asshole.
Yeah, love it.
Oh shit. I'm breaking my chair. But yeah, dude, it's like, and what's funny is talking about like not wanting to like put ourselves on a pedestal. It's how Adam, like, he messaged me. He goes, dude, you never do anything with like Vice Lord. And he's like, why don't you ever? Like, I had this. And he's like, the owl was for you. I think he was even just like, I was gonna let you grab the owl because you always said you wanted a pet, and every time there's a pet, you don't grab it. And I'm like, because I want everyone else to have a turn, and like I want them to get it, and but like I was like, okay,
right. And
like, I'll bring up Vice Lord. It's fine.
It's hard to do that for yourself, especially while you're trying to encourage other people, right? Like I totally understand that, and it's like. Yeah. So much of that, like, do as I say, not as I do type of mentality, but like it's not a conscious type of thing we're doing. I think so many times we're so comfortable taking that backseat role and playing a support role in other people's lives because one, we're not getting judged for being in the support role. Right? True. Like it doesn't open us up to criticism by just supporting people. It's so easy for me to support people. I share my platform. I just built a show about me sharing my platform. Like you don't see me on here doing this myself, tooting my own horn. I'm like, let me bring my friends on. Let me bring neurodivergent people on because this is how.
We'll toot your horn for you.
Right. Exactly. No, but it's really a safe space to be in that support role. And like coming out of that feels selfish, right? Like at least I do. I'm not saying you're selfish because I want you to do those things, Ron. But when I do that, I feel selfish and undeserving of that spotlight, that attention, or like even when I'm trying to get like my basic needs met. Like, that feels selfish to me, like, and it's so difficult.
It's been the hardest thing. Something that I had to learn, really, it's to, like, for the I guess the, support of my marriage. But, like, after a while, it's like I would never ask for things, like, that I needed. And it started to turn into resentment. And I think we do that, too, with our friends sometimes. After a while, we don't realize that we need certain things.
Right.
And that's why a lot of our relationships can blow up for us because somebody does something or hasn't been giving us something and we don't realize that it's because we haven't fucking asked for it.
Right. And then you let those feelings kind of build, and that creates a resentment. I know that feeling perfectly, Ron. Like, you're preaching to the choir here. Like, whew.
Yeah, for sure.
But then it like stacks shame, right? Like, like we didn't spend a lot of time talking about shame, thank goodness, because shame. But like, I really do think like there is like a foundational layer of shame, like undertones of all of this, right? Like anything that we do that we get rejected from, the RSD that we feel manifests itself as shame. Right, and that shame can present itself in a whole bunch of different ways. I talked about my sobriety and like 10 years of alcoholism. That's a lot of fucking shame to carry. And I tell people, like, I love who I am now, but I don't think I could ever forgive that person who I was. And that makes it really hard to accept who I am now, because I was that person too. That person still is in there, and I hate that person. I despise that person. And so it makes it difficult to love who I am now, right? So carrying shame, it's not like you can just drop it off and like, oh, I don't need to feel shame about that anymore. I haven't drank in 5 years. It's like, nope, we're going to carry this for the rest of our lives. Like, it becomes hard. And so, like, the role that shame plays, we talked about RSD, but I think shame can also be like a physical manifestation of RSD, like all of it. And I like to think of it as like a reservoir. Like, I have a shame reservoir, right? And I don't want to open that floodgate immediately and just let all the water out, right? Because that would just destroy me. But like, letting a trickle out isn't really draining the dam either, right? And so like, I can maintain where I'm at now, which is pretty good, right? By just keeping it all shut. But I feel like this well of shame deep in my core, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, forgiveness of who we are is a really tough thing, because like I don't have that by any means, but I do have a similar thing with like being ashamed of a person that didn't care to like better himself.
Sure.
And I guess it comes down to, right, and it's like what a lot of people deal with undiagnosed ADHD is realizing, because they're still ashamed of that person that they were when they were younger.
Yeah.
And I don't know, someone once told me, it's just like it started with once my first person that I coached didn't go very well. And there was definitely red flags in the beginning.
Right.
And I knew I shouldn't have taken the client, but it was my first one. And I'm like starting up. And so I'm like, yeah, I can take it on. I can do whatever.
Sure.
And I ended up breaking up with that client. And at first was ashamed in the sense where I was just like, God, I fucking knew it. Like, why didn't I do that? And then somebody once told me, it's just like, that you had no idea. Like, you may have had like an intuition, but you didn't have enough knowledge to learn to trust that intuition in you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so it's like, you know, things happen because of course they did. Like, of course me then did that. And like me now wouldn't. But like, if me then didn't do that, me now would do it again. I don't know.
Right.
Like,
no, I followed that perfectly. And I totally agree.
But I get it too. But like, and so I guess that's what it is. Like, it's so hard to not be ashamed of these things, because, you know, whether it's addiction or alcoholism, or even just as simple as the symptoms of ADHD that we're ashamed of.
Oh, yeah.
As much as I try so hard and know that it's like, no, I need to understand that I like was hard on myself for something that's just the way my brain worked. Like, now I know that, but I'm still hard on myself for it.
I'm still hard on myself too. Like the other day, my wife, she wanted to watch a show, right? And so I had the remote. She's like, hey, can we watch this? I'm like, yeah, absolutely. And then like I hit the guide, and then I just like zoned out, right? As soon as the screen kind of changed, I didn't even select a show. And she's like, are you going to put that show on or not? And I was like, oh, yeah. And so I put it on, but inside I thought, damn, I wonder how many times she's had to deal with this exact situation where she just thinks, like, I've totally ignored her. I've totally blown her off. Like, and I'm grateful for the diagnosis, because now I know, and now hopefully she's aware. I mean, she's going to watch this. So, honey, now you know. But like,
I love you, and I'm sorry.
I do feel that shame just for the amount of extra effort she has to go through just to accommodate me over the littlest things, right? Like, it's hard. It's super hard to forgive yourself for the symptoms of ADHD. I totally understand that. Like,
there's so many times I see videos of like people going like, you know, hey, you shouldn't put up with this in your relationship. And I'm like, right away I'm going, that's an ADHDer.
Right.
That's why they're doing that. Like,
right.
You know, oh, the reason you have to do that is because that person has ADHD and you're telling them you shouldn't have to be in a relationship like this, and that
Right.
makes me feel like shit, right?
Right.
It's like, yeah, like, or the things when people say if they wanted to they would.
Right.
I'm like, fuck.
Like if I wanted to, I would. I would.
Like I try so hard. It's like you don't have no idea how much like I want to do all these
Right.
things for Gwen, right? Or for whoever, my friends or whatever, and all of a sudden I'll forget. Or it'll be something like we talked about. You're buying a gift for somebody and like you want it to be so perfect, come up with all these ideas, and then all of a sudden that was today and I don't have anything,
Exactly.
and you go and get something stupid. Right? And it's like you just like it's not that we're and we feel guilty about that kind of shit, and it sucks. And you know, that's not going to change, and I don't think there's a single person on the planet that doesn't feel bad about that at some level. But that's what we're here for, right? To make it known and to make it something that people are less ashamed for.
Right. Well, and I think honestly, that's where I think like our advocacy is so important, right? Like I came from a life where I thought ADHD was just the only thing I really knew about ADHD was there's like this Adderall epidemic sweeping the country, right? In like the 90s and early 2000s. That's all you heard about. Like we're just poisoning our kids left and right and just feeding them pills, la la la.
That's what that Netflix show's about.
And I never learned what ADHD was. I think back, I had a coworker I worked with. He told me he had ADHD, and I was like, "Oh, really? Okay, like that's a bummer." But if I had taken the time and like if I had learned from him back then, I could have learned about my ADHD like 4 years earlier, right? And like I wrote it off as like, oh, this Adderall thing, like that, like I'm sure you got pumped full of pills as a kid, right? And it's that stigma about it is what I'm trying to break. I want people to
100%.
know that like it is so much more than not being able to pay attention. Like paying attention is literally like the least of my fucking problems. Like if I'm totally honest with you, like we just went through shame and RSD. Like let's start there if we want to talk about my problems.
There's so much, and there's so much I didn't know was like I was diagnosed at 12. And like I just thought it was like, I zone out. I like can't pay attention to some things.
Right.
It's hard for me to like stay organized, and that's what ADHD is. And I had it. It was diagnosed with it, and didn't realize what it really was until like 3 years ago.
Right.
But I will say I do think like compared to when I was diagnosed to now, like I up until this last year for a while was coaching baseball at the high school down the street, and there was a kid who has it. Like the way I found out was like he was a freshman, and so he came onto the team, and we were talking about the new kids like coming in, and the head coach was like, "Oh, just so everyone knows, you know, I forget his name now, but like you know, Tyler has ADHD." And so, you know, we're gonna have to like come up with different plans if like the way that we're coaching him isn't working.
Oh,
and I'm like, what?
Wow.
That's fucking amazing. In my head, I'm just like, and then I said,
that's
like,
incredible.
I was like, oh well, I have ADHD, and they're like, really? Like, you don't seem like you have ADHD. And I was like, okay, whatever, fuck you guys. I was like, that's amazing. And like I talked to the kid about it, and he goes, "Yeah, great. Like I get the reason he came to that high school was the other one wasn't doing enough, but like he has like an IEP, and he gets like extra stuff on tests, and he's allowed to go into like an empty classroom to like work on stuff, and like all these things that they give him.
That's amazing.
And I'm just like, this is so great. Like when I like coming from a kid who was told not to tell anyone, to like this is like really
that's amazing,
really exciting for me. So I'm excited about that, and that makes me feel good about like where we're headed. I mean, there's still a lot of work to go. Like I always say, the amount of information we have on ADHD, it's like we're still in the dark ages with stuff, and so we're learning more all the time, and it's great. And everyone that's really good at researching stuff, which like, and when I say researching, I mean doing their own research by like running like tests and doing all this shit and learning stuff, like those are the people that I want to put on a pedestal, because I can't do that. I could take all their information
Right.
and then make TikToks about it and
Sure.
like inspire people, and like I'll do that part of it.
Totally.
But like fucking, it's great that so many people are devoting their lives to it.
Yeah, it's a
and I'm
wonderful thing.
excited about that.
Awesome. Well, I think we're about up on time. Like, that was 2 hours. Like,
Yeah.
this show just flies by, right? Like,
I could, yeah,
I'm
just talk forever.
right, for sure. Last thing, real quick, remind people where they can find you, just in case
Yeah.
they weren't paying attention at the beginning.
So my website, ADHD Coach Ron, and then you can find me at ADHD Coach Ron. So it's ADHDCoachRon.com. Find me at ADHD Coach Ron on TikTok, ADHD_Ron on Instagram. And yeah, you can follow my socials from my website. Go to my website,
absolutely.
check it out, say hi, write me a message. I really like messages.
And I will say, I've sat in on some of Ron's seminars. They are freaking fantastic.
Yeah.
Like, I learned so much. You want to talk about like synthesizing information? He's great at it, and he presents it in such a digestible way. It's really, really excellent. I reckon, like, as soon as I clear up my schedule, I'm in that class, so you can come with me in there. And let me tell you something. We talked about toxic positivity. There's only like 3 or 4 ADHD coaches I endorse in general. And like Ron is just like at the top of my list. I love you, dude. Thank you for coming on to this show. Like, I appreciate
it was
being your
blast.
friend. Like, this is amazing.
Yeah,
like, I'm grateful for everything you do for this community. Like,
Thanks,
keep
bud.
doing it. Like, you're awesome.
Hey, right back at you. I know I'm not gonna make you feel uncomfortable with all that, but you're fucking dope. And yeah, it's amazing what you've done. So.
All right. Yeah, tune in next week. We'll have another guest. I haven't locked it up yet. I'm really bad at scheduling. I'll let you all know like 2 days ahead. But I also wanted to make you all aware, I'm going to be doing another show on this Twitch channel. It's just going to be like a blind reaction show where we just get a bunch of people together and we just look at funny stuff at from the internet that we've never seen before, and you'll just get to see our reactions to it, right? So that'll be a lot of fun. You can follow all of our socials and stuff. Follow mine right below me here. I look forward to seeing you all next week. Let's give a round of applause for Ron. Greatly appreciate it, dude. Seriously, that was an amazing episode. Like, I feel like we got the audio fixed from last week, and there's a pretty presentation. Like, I think more people will probably watch this. Yeah.
Like, it was great. Thanks, Spence.
I loved it, man. Thank you. And I'm going to have you on this Twitch channel as much as I can, because we just have so much fucking fun.
Hell yeah.
But yeah, I look forward to, like, I'll see you in D&D.
Sure.
All right.
Later.
Everybody else, take care. Love you. Have fun. And thank you.